When you cross to the other side of Oceanus in your ship, where there's a promontory and a fertile grove of Persephone, tall poplars and willows which drop their fruit, beach the ship near deep eddying Oceanus, and you yourself go to the moldering house of Hades. Before the entrance itself, in the very jaws of Orcus, sorrow and cares, the avenging spirits, place their beds. Sickness with its pallor, and sad old age live there, and fear, seductive hunger, and foul want, forms terrible to see, and death, and toil, and sleep, death's brother, and foul-minded exultation, and on the opposite shore, murderous war, the Furies in chambers of irons, and mad discord, her serpentine hair tied up with bloody bands. In the middle, a dark elm spreads its branches, its ancient arms, a huge tree where empty dreams make their home and hang themselves under every leaf. Nearby are many monstrous forms of wild beasts. Centaurs and double-formed Scylla are stabled at the gates, and the hundredfold Briareus and the Lernaean beast hissing horribly, and the Chimera armed with flames and Gorgons and Harpies in the form of the threefold shade Geryon. Suddenly trembling with dread, Aeneas took his sword and turned its drawn edge against them as they came, and if, when his companion realized that they were thin shadows without a body, flitting forms, empty images, if she had not warned him, he would have rushed them and struck the shadows with his sword, all in vain. We left our heroes at the entrance to the Underworld, a place which goes by many names. Hades, Dis, after its ruler, Erebus, personified darkness. Sometimes it's called Orcus, after the god of punishing oath-breakers. And sometimes it's named for its geographical features. Several of our heroes will travel down into the depths of the underworld, but Odysseus doesn't need to go that far. He seeks information from the prophet Tiresias, who has died and so resides in the underworld. But at Circe's behest, Odysseus performs a ritual to bring Tiresias's ghost up to him.
Here Perimedes and Eurylochus held the victims, and drawing my sharp sword from my thigh, I dug a trench about a forearm in length and width, and around it I poured out libations to all the dead. First honey, then sweet wine, third water, and over these I sprinkled white barley. And I implored the fleeting faces of the dead that when I returned to Ithaca, I would sacrifice in my halls a bear and heifer, whichever one was the best, and fill the pyre with gifts. And to Tiresias alone, apart from the rest, I would sacrifice a black ram, whichever one stood out from our flock. And when I had invoked them, the crowd of the dead, with prayers and entreaties, I took the sheep and slaughtered them over the trench, and their black blood flowed. And there came the souls of the dead up out of Erebus. Young brides and unwed boys, old men worn from misery, tender maidens with fresh mourning in their hearts, many wounded by bronze spears, men killed at war, covered in gore and still holding their weapons. The masses thronged around the trench on all sides, crying out with shrill wails. Fear seized me, and I grew pale. Then I urged my companions, ordering them to skin the sheep, the one that I had killed, slaughtering it with the ruthless bronze, and burn it, and to pray to the infernal gods, stout Hades and dread Persephone. And I myself, my sharp sword drawn, sat beside the sheep and didn't allow the fleeting faces of the dead to come near the blood, before I questioned Tiresias. And at last he came.
Tiresias drinks the blood that Odysseus has provided, and gives Odysseus a prophecy about the hardships he'll have to face before he returns home to Ithaca. After receiving Tiresias' prophecy, Odysseus speaks to the ghost of his mother, who died while he was on his journey, and whose ghost he now encounters at the entrance to the Underworld. Afterwards, Odysseus returns to his crew, and they sail onward, leaving the Underworld behind them. But our other heroes must journey deeper into the Underworld to get what they came for, wading through its waters and facing its monsters. There, into Acheron flows the Periplegathon, and Cocytus, which in fact breaks off from the Stygian waters, and a rock, and the joining of the two loud thundering rivers. The first thing many of our heroes encounter is a body of water. The underworld is full of water of different kinds serving different purposes. Aeneas enters through Lake Avernus, inside a volcanic crater of the same name, in the Bay of Naples. They say that there are 5 rivers in the underworld, each serving its own purpose. Most famously, the river Styx, by which the gods swear oaths that they can't break. It's called the River of Hatred, and souls when they die need to cross it in order to enter the afterlife. Like much of the underworld's geography, it shares its name with real-life rivers. Next is Acheron, sometimes a river, otherwise described as a lake. It's called the River of Misery, or the River of Woe, and it too provides passage to the afterlife. Next is the Cocytus, the River of Wailing. It branches off from the Styx and flows into the Acheron, and some say that it leads directly to Tartarus. Deeper in the underworld is the Phlegathon, also known as the Periplegathon, the River of Fire. It too flows into the Acheron and surrounds Tartarus with its flames. And lastly, the River Lethe, which our heroes will meet later on. Several of these bodies of water represent the transition from life to death to the afterlife. Souls wait to cross their waters into eternity, but not all who wait are allowed to go. Only those who have been properly buried are allowed passage across the waters, and the rest are stranded on this side of the river, not alive, but not allowed to cross over into the afterlife. These are the restless, wandering, unsatisfied dead, which haunt the living. Those who have been buried properly and have been given coins to pay the fare to cross the river are led by Charon, who accepts the coins as payment. From here is the road to Tartarus that leads to the waves of Acheron. There in a vast chasm a whirlpool, gurgling with mud, boils and belches out sand into the Cocytus. A boatman, frightful in his dread squalor, guards these waters and the rivers. Charon, on whose chin lay neglect and old age. He stands with flaming eyes, a filthy cloak hanging from his shoulders by a knot. He drove the boat himself with a pole and guided its sails, and he transported bodies in his rusty skiff. He was old by now, but old age for a god is fresh and green. To this place the whole crowd of souls was rushing, pouring itself onto the banks. Aeneas wondered, and moved by the commotion said,
"Tell me, maiden, what does the crowd want at the river? What are those souls seeking? What is the division by which some leave the banks and others sweep the blue waters with oars?"
The aged priestess answered him briefly. "Son of Anchises, truest offspring of the gods, you are looking at the deep pools of Cocytus in the Stygian lake, whose divine power the gods fear to swear falsely by. all of this that you see is the crowd of the destitute and unburied. That boatman is Charon. Those whom the waves are carrying have been buried. He isn't allowed to transport anyone across the dread banks and the rough waters before their bones are laid to rest in tombs. They wander for 100 years and flock around these shores. Then, at long last, when they're allowed, they once again see the waters they've longed for. The vessel which carries souls from one side of the river to the other is driven by Charon. When souls arrive on the banks of the river, he collects coins that they've brought to him. On her Katabasis journey, Psyche brings 2 coins, one for passage to the Underworld, and one for the trip back. When Aeneas encounters Charon, at first, Charon refuses to let him cross, since he's alive. He says that Heracles, Theseus, and Pirithous all took the ferry across the river, although alive. Heracles stole Cerberus from the underworld and brought him back to the world of the living, and Theseus and Pirithous tried to sleep with Persephone herself. No, Charon says, I won't transport any more living souls across the river. But when Aeneas and his guide, the Sibyl, present him with the golden bow, he changes his tune. He loads Aeneas into the boat, and with Aeneas's living weight dragging the boat down, he gives them passage. When Aeneas enters the underworld, he finally finds his father, who explains to him that souls are judged on their merits. The way that one behaves in life reflects where one ends up in the underworld. Anchises lays out the geography of the underworld on the Platonic model, which says that some souls are deemed to be good, and others are deemed to be bad. The judgment of souls, determining where you end up in the afterlife, is not a new concept by the time it comes to Greece. Already in Egyptian mythology, the heart is weighed against a feather, and its weight determines whether a soul is deemed worthy or not. The seeds of such judgment exist in Greece's earliest literature, but they take their shape fully in Plato, Virgil's model for the underworld that Aeneas travels through.
In a word, whatever sort of traits the body had in life, these also are present, all or many of them, at the time of death. And it seems to me that the same also happens with the soul. Everything is manifest in the soul when it is stripped from the body, and the person has within the soul both their nature and the experiences which come from all of their experiences. Therefore, when they arrive at their judge, for example, those in Asia come before Rhadamanthus, and Rhadamanthus sets them up so that he can see the soul of each, not knowing whose it is. He perceives that the soul is not healthy, but scourged and full of wounds, the results of oath-breaking and injustice, which each deed imprinted onto the soul. And it's all gnarled from lies and pretense, not straight, since it was raised without truth, and from unrestrained luxury and hubris and lack of self-control in their actions. He sees that the soul is full of filth and disharmony, and seeing this, he immediately sends it away in dishonor to a prison, where when they arrive, they will be destined to suffer the appropriate punishment.
Sinful souls are sent to Tartarus, the lowest part of the underworld, surrounded by Phlegethon, the river of fire. Tartarus is the precursor to the concept of hell that develops in medieval Christianity. It is, above all else, a place of punishment, where souls are sent to be tortured for the sins they committed during life. King Sisyphus is punished for, among other things, committing hubris and ignoring the laws of Xenia, and he's forced to roll a rock up a hill, only to have it fall down the other side, for all eternity. Tantalus, who greedily steals ambrosia from the gods and tricks them into cannibalism, is forced to sit in a pool of water that he can never drink from, underneath a fruit tree from which he can never eat, doomed to perpetual hunger and thirst. Ixion murdered his father-in-law and tried to seduce Hera herself, for which he was strapped to a wheel of fire, forever turning and burning in lust. Although the worst offenders must spend eternity in Tartarus, souls which can be rehabilitated are released after a certain amount of time. If Tartarus is the precursor to Christian hell, then Elysium is its heaven. Elysium, sometimes called the Isles of the Blessed, is a place of eternal reward for the most noble souls, those related to gods and heroes, or heroes in their own right, those who achieve great glory in battle or accomplish noble deeds throughout their life. Its climate is temperate, and it provides everything the soul needs to live a wonderful afterlife. But the majority of souls, those neither exceptional in wickedness or virtue, will go to the fields of Asphodel. It's located near the Demos Oneiron, the land of dreams. Hamlet said, "To die, to sleep. To sleep perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come." In the Greco-Roman underworld, sleep and death are brothers. And before souls are allowed to enter Asphodel, they need to drink from the river Lethe.
They all went to the field of oblivion, through a burning and stifling heat, since it was devoid of trees and whatever nature produces. And so because it was already evening, they camped beside the river of forgetfulness, whose water no vessel contains. In fact, it was required for everyone to drink some measure of the water, and some who didn't remember their purpose drank more than the measure. And every one of them, as they drank, forgot everything.
Meanwhile, Aeneas saw in the valley below a secluded grove and rustling thickets in the forest, and the river Lethe, which flows by the peaceful meadows. Crowds of people, untold multitudes, were flocking around it, like bees in the meadow on a calm summer day. They settle on various flowers and pour themselves out around white lilies, and the whole field sounds with their buzzing. Aeneas shuddered at the sight, not knowing what he was looking at, and quickly asked for answers. What were those waters? Who were the men filling the banks in rows like this? Then his father Anchises answered.
They are souls, to whom new bodies are owed by fate. By the waves of the river Lethe, they drink its waters of forgetfulness and eternal oblivion.
The fifth and final river of the underworld is the river Lethe, called the River of Forgetfulness. When souls drink from it, they lose all remembrance of their living days, their lives, their bodies, their relatives. The souls bound for Asphodel must drink from this river and leave their life behind. But, Virgil says, those who drink from the river Lethe are bound for reincarnation. Aeneas watches the souls drink from the river Lethe as his father explains who they will be when they're reincarnated. He gives a prophecy of the glory of future Rome and shows Aeneas the souls that will become Romulus, Remus, Caesar, Augustus, and all the heroes that will bring honor to Aeneas's descendants. This is the information that Aeneas has come to the underworld to receive. Armed with the knowledge of his future destiny, he can turn back. But although Aeneas never meets the king and queen of the underworld themselves, other heroes on their Katabasis journey do. The god in charge of the underworld is Hades, brother of Zeus and Poseidon, doomed to rule over the souls of the dead and stuck below the earth in the underworld. His misery led him to kidnap a bride, the nymph Persephone, goddess of Demeter. After tricking her into eating pomegranate seeds, he forces her to spend part of the year in the underworld with him, and the other half of the year she's allowed to return to her mother and the world above. When Heracles journeys to the underworld, he convinces Hades to let him take Cerberus back with him, the three-headed monster born from Medusa, which guards the underworld. On Psyche's journey, she seeks the beauty of Persephone herself. Venus has commanded her to bring back some of Persephone's beauty in a box, and she convinces the queen of the underworld to let her take it.
Psyche, without delay, made for Tartarus, where she duly equipped herself with coins and cakes and made the descent to the underworld. Passing in silence the lame donkey driver, paying her fare to the ferryman, ignoring the plea of the dead swimmer, rejecting the crafty entreaties of the weavers, and appeasing the fearsome rage of the dog with her cake, she arrived at Proserpine's palace. She declined her hostess's offer of a soft seat and rich food, and sitting on the ground before her feet, content with a piece of coarse bread, she reported Venus's commission. The box was immediately taken away to be filled and closed up in private, and given back to Psyche.
And most famously, Orpheus, the magic bard, must convince Hades and Persephone to allow him to bring back to the world of the living the soul of his dead lover, Eurydice. Making his way through the shadowy tribes and the ghosts of the unburied, he came to Proserpina, throned beside the Lord of Shadows who rules that dismal domain, and plucking the strings of his lyre, he began.
You powers divine of the subterranean kingdom, where all of mortal creation must one day sink to our doom, if you will give me permission to tell you the truth unvarnished by shifty pretenses, I've not come down to explore the murky regions of Tartarus, nor to enchain the three-headed monster Medusa bore, the dog whose coat is bristling with adders. I'm here in search of my wife, cut off in the years of her youth when a viper she trampled discharged its venom inside her ankle. I'd hoped to be able to bear my loss and confess that I tried, but love was too strong. That god is well known in the world above, and I wonder whether you know him here. I divine that you do. If rumor has not invented the tale of that old abduction, you too are united by love. In the name of these confines of fear, in the name of this vast abyss, in your realm of infinite silence, I, Orpheus, implore you, unravel the web of my dear Eurydice's early passing. We all are destined for you. We may tarry a little bit, but sooner or later, we speed to our one habitation. This is the place that we are all bound for, our final dwelling, and yours is the longest reign that the human race must endure. Eurydice, too, when her due of years has been ripely completed, shall own your sway. But till then, I beg you to let me enjoy her. If fate forbids you to show my wife any mercy, I'll never return from Hades myself. You may join the deaths of us both.
As Orpheus pleaded his cause, enhancing his words with his music, he moved the bloodless spirits to tears. For a moment, Tantalus ceased to clutch at the fleeting pool. Ixion's wheel was spellbound, the vultures halted their pecking at Tydeus' liver, the Danaids dropped their urns, and Sisyphus sat on his boulder. The Furies' hearts were assuaged by the song, and the story goes that they wept real tears for the very first time. The king and queen of the world below forbore to refuse such a moving appeal, and they summoned Eurydice. Leaving the rest of the ghosts who had newly arrived, she slowly trailed along on her wounded ankle. Orpheus was told he could lead her away on one condition: to walk in front and never look back until he had left the Vale of Avernus, or else the concession would count for nothing.
The way down to Avernus is easy. The door to Blackness lies open day and night, but to retrace your steps and escape to the air above, this is the challenge and the burden.
The Sibyl tells Aeneas that the way down to Avernus is easy, but to return, this is what defines a Katabasis journey. Its opposite, the Anabasis, the journey back up to the world of the living. This, she says, is the hardest part, and it is in this part where we see two of our heroes fail. After convincing Persephone to give up some of her beauty, Psyche returns to the world of the living. But tempted by the beauty she holds inside the box, she makes an error.
And giving the ferryman her second coin, she returned from the underworld, much more briskly than she had come. Having regained and worshipped the bright light of day, though in a hurry to complete her mission, she madly succumbed to her reckless curiosity.
"What a fool I am,"
said she,
"to be carrying divine beauty and not to help myself even to a tiny bit of it, so as perhaps to please my beautiful lover."
So saying, she opened the box, but she found nothing whatever in it. No beauty, but only an infernal sleep. A sleep truly Stygian, which when the lid was taken off and it was let out at once took possession of her and diffused itself in a black cloud of oblivion throughout her whole body, so that overcome by it, she collapsed on the spot where she stood in the pathway and lay motionless, a mere sleeping corpse.
Psyche is only saved from this deathly sleep by Cupid, who revives her and takes her back with him, convincing his mother to allow Psyche to join the ranks of the gods and be his equal. Without this divine intervention, Psyche fails her Katabasis journey, succumbing to the temptations she encounters along the way. Orpheus fails his test as well.
And now turning his steps back again, he had evaded all dangers, and Eurydice, now returned to him, was on her way to the air above, following behind him, since Proserpina had given this decree, when suddenly madness took hold of her careless lover. Let it be forgiven, if spirits know forgiveness. He was waiting for his Eurydice now, just beneath the light of day, careless, alas. His mind defeated, he looked back, and in that moment all his effort was poured out, and his treaty with the hostile tyrant broken, and 3 times a crash was heard in the Avernian waters. She said,
"What is it? Orpheus, what has ruined me, wretched woman that I am? And you, why such madness? Ugh. The cruel fates are calling me back once again, and sleep is closing my swimming eyes. Goodbye. I'm being carried away, surrounded by the immensity of night, stretching my weak hands to you. Alas, no longer yours."
She spoke, and suddenly before his eyes, like smoke mingling with thin air, she fled, dissolved, and although he tried to grasp her shadows in vain, wishing desperately to speak with her, he saw her no more, and the ferryman of Orcus would not allow the boat to pass across the waters a second time.
Psyche and Orpheus may have failed, but the hero Aeneas does not. After receiving the prophecy from his father Anchises, Aeneas turns back to the world of the living, where he encounters 2 gates.
There are 2 gates of sleep, of which one is made of horn, where easy exit is given by true dreams, and the other shining perfectly with bright ivory. But the shades send false dreams. Anchises accompanied his son together with the Sibyl, and with those words sent them out of the gate of ivory. And Aeneas cut a path towards the ships, and once again saw his friends.
The gate of horn represents truth, and the gate of ivory represents dreams. By returning through the gate of ivory, Virgil suggests to us that maybe for Aeneas, his entire Katabasis had been a dream. Many heroes undertake a Katabasis journey. Some are successful and others fail, and whether or not you succeed determines the direction of your life going forward. Heracles brings Cerberus back with him, proceeds on his labors, completes his term of servitude, and moves on with his life. Odysseus and Aeneas, armed with the knowledge that they came for, continue their journeys and fulfill their destiny. Psyche is saved by divine intervention, but Orpheus is not, and he spends the rest of his life in misery, swearing off women and eventually being torn to pieces by a crowd of them. The Katabasis journey is not for the faint of heart. It demands that you face the demons and monsters of the underworld and the deepest, darkest depths of your own soul. In the underworld, Odysseus finds the ghost of his mother, Aeneas his father, and Dido, who he left in Carthage and who subsequently took her own life as a result of his actions. Monsters, demons, and wicked gods try to keep you in the underworld, and it's only through your own strength, willpower, and frankly luck that you're able to return. Those who succeed are forever changed. Growth demands a confrontation of the darker parts of the world and of your own soul. And death is not just an end, but the beginning of a new cycle. I hope you enjoyed this journey to the underworld. If you did, you can let me know by leaving a thumbs up or a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate you being here. Be well, happy spooky season, and I will see you in the next video.